welcome everyone. You are listening to and perhaps watching Calling The Audible. I'm your host, Peeze, Della, Reeze. I am joined by my producer, Eagle at Master Control. As we continue to test things moving forward, hopefully next week we'll be able to get Eagle on camera as well. For now, it's a big spacious place for me to work in and a very cramped part of the studio for Eagle. But I get all this space to share a week's worth of FPF with you.
Because your ego's so big.
That's it, though. That's why I'm on this show by myself. It's incredibly awkward, by the way. But that's why, for those of you watching on Facebook Live, please do feel free to participate in the show. It helps me. It helps us have a more entertaining show. Also, if you haven't watched on Facebook Live, remember, if you listen to the podcast and the next week rolls around, you say, hey, you know what? I remember now the show's on Thursday between 7 and 8 o'clock. That's when the guys start. I get a notification on Facebook. Let me go check it out. Let me go see what's going on in the show. And that week you can participate. It'd be awesome. I got news, actually, Eagle, about Voodoo after talking about whether or not Kevin Marshall will be on the team. Kevin Marshall's not on the team this fall.
Do we need, breaking news or something?
Yes.
I actually don't have that clip, but
All
that's
right.
okay.
Hum it for me.
Wait, well, I can use this.
Okay. Where is this sound from?
This is what you call reusing assets. Peace.
So the breaking news is Kevin Marshall not with Voodoo this season. Hey, where is that sound from?
I'm pretty sure I got it off the internet.
Yeah, but what other show is it commonly appearing on?
It's not coming to me. I feel like it would be something with spicy takes.
Yes.
Something a little bit liquidy, but
this is
a
the
little
worst
bit
promo you've ever done. You're awful at this. This perhaps is better that you're not on camera. For those FPFers who want some FPFers takes on sports and the like, feel free to tune in to Hot Sauce Sports. We are in somewhat of a partnership with FPF. So a lot of the faces you recognize. Our website, of course, is hotsaucesports.ca. And our weekly podcast called Hot Sauce Sports as well. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, as well as wherever else you get your podcasts. We do it on Facebook Live as well. This week, we interviewed boxing legend Otis Grant. Awesome week this week. So I'm a little tired because we've been doing it a lot, man. It's been an endurance run.
You got so tired, we actually recorded some stuff that we can use instead of you talking.
Sorry? You've been listening to Hot Sauce Sports.
Yeah, I can say words on your behalf.
That's true. Let's just pre-record everything for next week, and then I'll just use that. So, I mean, for those who know me, know that I'm not driving myself here. I don't like to. I need to be driven. I don't like to do things for myself. This, Eagle. You've had to deal with me forever. So my driver dropped me off to the show, and I'm expecting to be picked up after the show. Although I have a feeling I will be waiting. I'm disappointed by that because we happen to do the show when there's Thursday Night Football. We're trying to get it as early as possible to you guys so that way it doesn't interfere with Thursday Night Football. Although announcers don't say shit, so you're better off just watching the game on mute and listening to this show if you want to watch it later. So I do think that is the best way to go. Eagle, I was at the field on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see Joey Taylor getting his revenge on the Urgence guys. The guys who beat him, who knocked him out in the springtime.
And we did talk about this where Urgence is not the exact same team, but it's basically the same core.
Well, but they had a 1-point victory against Dead Prez last week. This week they go in face Joey Taylor. Now, caveat, there was only 6 players in this game, as we talked about.
Total? 3-on-3?
No, 6 players for Urgence Midzik.
Because that would be awesome.
Yeah, also illegal. We wouldn't have a score for that one. It would just be a double forfeit. But we've never had to deal with that, eh? Thank God.
Double forfeit? I don't think so.
So anyway, looking at this game, I was there for, at one point they were down a player, so 2.5 Dans were against 6, and people can say whatever they like about Joey Taylor. there's no five guys in the world. It's just the way his offense works. Like there's no. I mean, five guys against any competent quarterback is immeasurably difficult. But when the system is specifically to flood zones, I mean, you have to guess every single time correctly. And knowing that you can't do that, he's just not going to take any chances and either check it down or dump into the ground.
Do you think 2HD is one of the best built teams given the cap imposed on Tier 1?
So this makes an interesting case for what we've been talking about for a long time, that for Division 1, if you want the division to be competitive, if you want teams to feel as though they compete, you need to A, have a hard cap, which we now have in Tier 1, and B, you need to go and get lower rated talent. And yeah, Danny Damour, absolute stud. Everyone knows that. He's also, probably the highest cap hit on this team. But like guys like Brandon Danielle were showing they can compete. Dominic Benevento in the past was like, oh, but these guys aren't big and physical enough. But it's still flag football at the end of the day. And these guys have such a familiarity with Joey Taylor that, this is a kind of team that typically would give Joey Taylor trouble. They're guys who are big and physical. Now, again, missing from here, Julien Bellamance, the guy we praised last week. Missing from the roster in general is
Alexis Godet, who's not on this roster.
Yeah, fair, and as well as
Julien Paiement.
You're thinking Alexis Gaumont.
Alexis Gaumont, yeah, sorry.
He's on the roster. I don't know if he's
back.
But
he hasn't played in 2 weeks.
I don't know if he's back from his injury yet.
Okay.
Mike Piercin, who played with them in winter, in spring. Julien Paiement played with them in spring, if I'm not mistaken. So there's key pieces that make it a different team. Now, Julien Paiement has played one game this season. Julien Bellavance hasn't played this season. Alexis Gaumont hasn't played this season. So it's definitely different when you have a guy like Nicolas Gropini, who, as talented as he is, he's going up against guys who now have been playing higher tier football for quite some time, and he's still a new, fresh face.
I'm not used to seeing Jesse Dupuis do so, not terribly, but just not well, right? When was the last time he only put up 3 TDs in a game?
Yeah, so it's been a while. And well, it was last week.
True. Yeah. Well,
but it's been like, when was the last time he strung 2 games together, I think is more the question. Because, I mean, yeah, and if anything, with Urgence Music or more so Tats have shown in the past, is that they can win in suboptimal conditions. And that's what happens when you have a great quarterback like Jesse Dupuis. That is the knock against Joey Taylor, that if things aren't set up for him in a specific way, the game won't go his way. But again, it's 2 weeks in a row, 3 touchdowns for Jesse Dupuis. It's he's struggling, and it doesn't look pretty, doesn't look as sharp, and you could see he's missing some of his familiar faces. And I think having Mike Piercin allowed us to really see what Jesse Dupuis' system can be when you have someone just as imposing and dominant as him on the field. That said, there's a lot of guys that know the Afatis guys, the Urgence Music guys, lower division guys. A lot of their guys also played previously with a team called Ravens, and then part of those guys went to play with Trinity. And within that group, there were some university level players. There were some other players who are not university level but have upper division experience. So kind of curious to see, nothing against, let's say, Nicolas Gropini, but also that's only 6 guys. Even though you brought up a guy who's he played with Simon Says a lot, mainly as a rusher this past spring, but more than that, we're missing his depth. You come into the game with only 6 guys playing both ways, and you're missing key personnel on your team. And size and speed, which is what this team has been for so long, that's not there. And that's the thing you need to contend against 2.5 Dans. And literally, it just looked like if you're on the side that we are Eagle, that Joey Taylor is talented, Joey Taylor has the ability to win in this league, then this is what the recipe is. He literally just sat back and ran his system, and it was honestly, it was fun to watch from an FPF fan perspective, and interesting because, again, this is a team that you would think would totally dominate the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that definitely was an interesting game to watch. I want to jump to tier 2 for a second, as I want to talk about one of the trends I seem to have noticed this past week was, tier 3. Tier 3 is interesting because you have teams that have moved down, in my opinion, to tier 3. So when I see a guy like, if I look back to 3 years ago, and I say Lockdown's playing in the lowest tier in Fall Cup, and I say Pat Riot is quarterback and throwing in the lowest tier, and is 0-2. I'm sure that would surprise you. Even though, like, let's take you off the team and just put your media hat on. I think that would surprise you. Am I right?
Yes.
With the trajectory of the team, it was a team that looked like it was on the rise. Gianfranco Ronaldo was coming off. At one point, was he an all-star or borderline all-star? Like
he was borderline all-star.
Like he just missed the cut, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
He lost to Alex Holowach, who we're going to have on the show later. Alex Holowach was selected over him, if I'm not mistaken. I was there to watch Trailer Park Boys beat you guys 39-13, and this is another case where I can't imagine we have an experienced, highly rated, highly decorated quarterback in the lower divisions in Pat Riot going up against a new team who's steadily improving, by the way. What we're seeing here compared to when we first saw them last Fall Cup is night and day in Trailer Park Boys. But it's still shocking. Not shocking was seeing you get completely blown away on a hook and go.
So there's actually a story behind that. First play of the game, I dropped a pick six, undercutting a hook. And then I saw the exact same play, or at least I thought, later on in the game when I had one-on-one on the outside, undercut the hook, and it was a go. So that was just completely... I mean, they baited me, and I took it. So I will eat the punishment of 6 points on the board for it. But, yep, it happens. It happens. You have to be smarter than that, though, right? If you're in a one-on-one with a guy, you can only undercut if you see the ball coming. Otherwise, there's no support behind you.
So where I disagree is if you have a quarterback like Pat Riot in tier 3, you shouldn't. The best way for the other team to score is to score quickly because it puts the ball back in his hands, and I would usually trust him to put up a lot of points and go score for score. But he just didn't look good.
Yeah, he made a lot of bad decisions. There were a few drops, but I don't think the problem was that. I really just think he had a bad game on this one.
Bad decisions, forcing the ball to Malcolm, or not to Malcolm Arch, to Sean Fontaine. And on third down, it's where he's going to go. Fourth down is where he's going to go. When it's long yardage, that's where he's going to go. The problem is that, first of all, Sean Fontaine, as good as a receiver as he is, he's not more athletic than any guy on Trailer Park Boys.
And I think that's the thing about Trailer Park Boys that people don't, or underestimate them, in that they're very physical as players.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they'll go for any ball. And I think that's what saves Antoine Meunier a lot of cases, because his throws are not all that accurate and they're not that great. It's just that his receivers and DBs on the other side of it fight for every single ball.
Yeah.
Like, they challenge everything, and they're big bodies. And they will, not that they'll hit you, but they'll knock you if there's a jump, right? Like, they're going for the ball.
They'll position their body in place. And
exactly. So
it's clean. It's just,
It's more physical than you expect from tier 3, right? If you're playing like Div 4, this is exactly what you expect. If you're playing Div 1, this is like peanuts in comparison. Yeah. But like, it's for a lot of teams that are coming in off the street, or just like it's the Saturday night boys type of thing, right? You come and you play football. This is a style that you're not used to seeing in the lower divisions, and I think for that reason, that's actually why they're 2-0. Because otherwise, I mean, I'm gonna give shit to my defense here. We did not play well, but given that, we dropped at least 2 more INTs that could have been easy return for scores.
I mean, and you mentioned you had a chance at a pick six. I know you typically play in Flats Eagle. When we played them the week before, I had an interception and Kevin Donna had 2 interceptions, and all we were doing was shooting gaps and attacking what we thought were the first reads, and that's something that an inexperienced quarterback like Antoine Meunier, he's not used to seeing shoots. So
we talked
about it on the show last week, and is that what you guys were trying to exploit, and is that why you guys were able to get your hands on the ball?
So yeah, I think we figured out their playbook pretty early on. I think the other portion that we picked up on is that he's a one-read quarterback.
Yes.
So he doesn't read pre-snap, but he picks a receiver in his mind within like a second or two and stares the route down the entire way. So it's very easy to get underneath it. What works, though, is that, like I mentioned, the receivers are going to challenge every single ball, and they have speed. So
and he's fast, too. So if he needs to buy time and look downfield, he will. If he needs to tuck and run, he will. He did run twice for 20 yards in this game. So, I mean, he has athleticism that allows him to kind of get away with that style a little bit more in Tier 3.
But that's it. I think in this game, I mean, the score was 39-13. They scored on the last play on a ball that should have been intercepted. But, again, the receiver just fought off Pat Riot on a pick and then ended up scoring on that play. But, yeah, I think we made them look better than they actually are here. I think if they hit a team who has a tighter defense and can actually score points, like, again, this game was not ours, I think they're going to get exposed. That's my feeling.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it. I remember when they started, Phil Ramsey was the guy everyone would pay attention to. He was the stud. And, like, okay, he had a touchdown in this game, but he only had one catch. And you look around, Hugo Jeffrey putting up numbers. You look at Alexandre Magnier, obviously the connection with his brother. Richard. You know, there's a lot of guys in this team. And, I mean, it's not common in Tier 3 to see 7 guys with receptions, all of them contributing in the game. And on defense, you know, they attacked the 1-9ers defense the week before with 7 interceptions. So, I mean, there's definitely something there. They're very aggressive in the flats, and they're very good at taking the deep ball away. So the hardest thing for new quarterbacks, which you'll see a lot in Tier 3, a lot of new guys, and this is what surprised me with Pat Riot, is they leave a lot of the intermediate area between the two slots and the middle of the field kind of open. Now, it's also challenged because of the fact that they're all tall. So it's not a particularly easy throw for a lot of Tier 3 quarterbacks to make. But that said, that's an area you need to challenge. And I saw in the parts of the game that I watched, Pat Riot continually just trying to challenge on the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening is a lot of the play calls are what I'll call it the Green Bay Mike McCarthy system, which is win your one-on-ones.
ISOs.
And frankly, yeah, it's all ISOs. And frankly, our receiving core is not designed for that, and their defense is exactly designed for that. Yeah. So it was a bad physical game, but it was also a bad mental game from him.
But the other thing is, if they could, from what, again, I don't watch the entire game. I had to warm up for my game. But from the part I saw, I don't believe I saw them go man once. They could have absolutely manned you the entire game.
Yep, absolutely.
And they would not have lost a single matchup.
Which is, what you think about it, if they're playing a zone and they're still winning one-on-ones, there's something going wrong, right? Yeah. Just straight up. So.
Well, the plays being called weren't plays that are zone breakers.
Exactly.
They were man breakers. You know, come back to sidelines, deep ends, like that's fine, except that it's also not. You're not calling against the defense. You're calling your game no matter what. You're not adapting to the defense you see, and that in itself was surprising to me. But we'll talk about quarterback play a little bit later in the show. We'll get to the next segment first. We'll talk about some of the other comings and goings. Do we have any action at all, Eagle, on Facebook Live?
We do have a few comments. Someone asked whether you prefer tangerines or clementines.
I want to say I prefer clementines. I know that the San Pellegrino sodas.
Oh, those are good.
Yeah, you mix the clementine one with gin. It is delicious. Do try that. I do like it. I feel like clementine has sort of like a bit of a lime aftertaste, which I really like. Big on citrus. You're never going to catch me having scurvy. That's all.
That's about it for now.
All right. That's excellent. It's a good question. Good question. Keep them coming. Honestly, that's about as good as it gets. Some of the other teams I saw, though, was Threat Level Midnight. Conversely, sort of like some old hens beating Los Banditos. Now, Los Banditos have a big loss this season. They do not have Vincent Benjamin.
Well, there's the season.
I know that I had asked Vincent Benjamin, like, hey, do you want to play this fall? He said, well, I can't play Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays.
Well, there you go.
I said, well, there we go. But I knew he wouldn't be there coming in. That said, I'm impressed with Francis Desrochers. I didn't know how good his arm was, and I think it wasn't that good, and his mechanics just got better, and his ability to throw on the run got far better. But you see, without being able to dump the slants off and air it out to Vincent Benjamin. It's not the same offense, and there's nobody lurking out there where you need to absolutely avoid that part of the field. No Loic Serra-Seguin in this game either. There, to me, were a tandem that I thought were just a menace in Division 6, or Division E, rather, the spring. And Joel Lemieux is like... So is this the thing that's going to happen where we thought Joel Lemieux was good? We moved him up, pushed him up into Div 4 at one point, then fell down to Div 5, and now played in Div 6, was too good for Div 6, and then he'll bounce up to Div 5, and then in a year or so he'll bounce down to Div 6. Is there something to do to address sort of the cusp here?
It's an easier thing to solve in theory and much harder in practice because stats don't lie, as they say, but they kind of do in the sense that if you have an easier schedule, or you're playing defenses that are weaker, or their good receivers show up and they make you look good as a quarterback, versus other years where maybe you get the bad matchups or your guys are on vacation or whatever, it tanks your numbers. So you can kind of jump up and down in that sense. So I can see the explanation as to why you're going up a tier and then down a tier, etc. But I think that's almost normal, right? Like if you're constantly moving up, that means you're constantly improving. But if you're fluctuating, that almost means you're correct in your rating, right? Think of a superstar who keeps getting paid the exact same money on every single contract he takes. That means you're consistent, at least. You're not great, but you're putting up the same numbers that earns you the same salary every year. So it's something in that general borderline explanation, I guess.
I think also having the same group of guys around for a couple of seasons now is helping. The group of J.D. Joly, Simon Richard, Anton Baril. Anton Baril, by the way, 4 sacks in this game on the very elusive Francis Della, limited him to 1 rushing attempt for 14 yards.
That's good.
That's pretty impressive. And aside from that, there's also the yardage you don't see in that what he does to scramble in the back in the backfield. Only 2 receivers taking part. We see Jérémy Gauthier and Julien Gingras with all the catches, all 10 catches in this game, and 3 touchdowns going to Jérémy Gauthier. I mean, the thing is, like, the whole thing that made Los Banditos great in the spring season was their depth, and that seems to have evaporated. And I think, again, it's not just the loss of Vincent Benjamin, although that definitely hurts. But now not seeing Loic Serra-Seguin is not on the team either. That is not going to be helpful either.
For Threat Level Midnight, what I'm interested to see was that last week, Simon Richard was actually quarterback. I imagine Jonathan Lemieux couldn't make it. And this week, he goes back to receiver. 8 receptions, 72 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So
he's just a phenomenal athlete. That's always been the case.
But think about it, right? This team, if they have him as QB, they're losing what you can argue is maybe the number 1 receiver, because J.D. Jolly is definitely on that list. Mathieu Demon's on that list. But, Simon Richard can't throw balls to himself.
True. I want to know how it is J.D. Jolly catches balls on offense when he drops every interception.
It's a different thing, right? Because when you're running routes, you're running away from the ball, whereas interceptions are running towards it. So the timing is a little bit different in when you got to get your hands up or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe if you're just undercutting it, you're expecting it to come in a little bit later, and it just hits you in the chest, hits you in the arms, hits you in the head. Yeah,
for sure. Yet another matchup that caught my attention between sort of like somewhat of an older, more familiar team versus somewhat of a newer team. Although, like, Les Augiers aren't entirely new, but they completely wiped out the very experienced, pardon my swag, with Brad Evans at quarterback.
Happy birthday, Brad Evans, by the way.
Yeah, I spoke to him earlier today. 30-15, doubling them up in a game between, Benjamin Reed hasn't played a ton of quarterback, and there's a decent core of new players on this team, or just guys who haven't played a ton of seasons. So they're not like FPF royalties so much. They came in as a lot of these guys came in as the Browns de Boucherville, if you remember, and taking on part of my swag. Although looking now at the game score, I see Frankie Scalzo was at quarterback, not Brad Evans.
So would you say that Les Augiers kind of had the same experience as the Browns de Boucherville, the way we related them to the actual Cleveland Browns, in that now they're having a resurgence?
I mean, they're different in that one had the money to pay players, and the other one went to a lower division. So it's not like the Browns went to the CFL.
No, but rather, I think like the Browns, the Boucherville lost like 20 games in a row or something,
Mhm.
and then Cleveland also had like 2 terrible seasons, and now
Yeah.
suddenly they have some talent and they've learned how
Fair.
to play the game, and they're actually winning.
They added, by the way, Renaud Saint Laurent of Ducks fame, and he added 5 catches in this game. Dude is big, physical, one of my favorite players in low divisions. The guy, to me, there's no limit as to where he can play at just because of the way he plays. Not necessarily the fastest dude, but kind of in a Don Shepard mold of snapping, where just be big, put your hands up, and dare anyone to get it. You know.
He beat us on a deep corner, I guess, last week. I'm not gonna say he was jogging it, but he was completely by himself because he just finds the holes.
Yeah. He's a smart football player, and he's able to get there. But, I know Frankie Scalzo was still, also, by the way, initially he was the first Ducks quarterback as well, if I'm not mistaken. So he finds himself playing against his ex-teammate. Frankie Scalzo only completing 9 passes in this game in replacing Brad Evans. Still, though, again, Sean Babin, Riley Pancombe, these are guys who've been around a long time in FPF.
Hutham Jermouni, I believe, is new on this roster.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a sense, you see it and you're like, okay, Part of My Swag's a familiar name, right? But then you look at the roster, like, they only have like a couple of guys that are sort of Part of My Swag teammates for a long time. Les Augiers, new team, but then you look and like, oh, wait, actually, I know a couple of these guys. So it's interesting in that, like, I started evaluating because I was looking at, like, what's an interesting storyline for the tier. And I said, what is interesting is, hey, we have these, this new team name against a familiar team name, but then that's the whole thing with FPF. We have to rebuild your teams to fit the cap. Sometimes guys will miss games, as is the case with Brad this week.
I think what's interesting here, though, is that, Tier 1, we talk about teams having to be broken up because of the whole aggressive cap and you can't have your super teams anymore. But Tier 2 and Tier 3, you've effectively registered with your core team. So you look at a team like Part of My Swag who has their core roster and it's not the same. That's because other players can't play on weekdays or whatever. So it's an entirely different experience for that team. So you don't really know what to expect. You can't really take the legacy or the history of these teams in because if it was the full team, they likely wouldn't fit Tier 3. They'd have to play
and also,
2.
like, I love how that's a thing that they complain about, but literally every other team in every other division has to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it happens. It's just simply how it goes. So I want to do one more thing, Eags, before I want to discuss one more thing before we get to Alex Holowach. I want to look at some of the
Well, actually, since we're at it, we do have some Facebook comments.
Okay, great.
One of them is, first off, on our Flag Plus football group. So different than our page, this is the actual group for the players in the community. There is a poll for the Game of the Week.
Great.
So for those of you who don't know what this is, Game of the Week is one of our magnificent videographers, either Chris Reeve.
I believe it's Chris Reeve this week.
It is Chris Reeve. Otherwise, we also have, I think Lance Daniel might be doing some, but I think he's doing Junior.
He's doing FPF Junior, and James Dandria will be doing.
James Dandria, yeah. So one of the videographers.
Once James Dandria is done with my wedding video, he's free to work on. Because, again, giant ego. It's worked well for me, though. It's worked wonders.
So what we do is we ask the community to vote on which game they'd like to watch, and then Chris is going to go film that game. So there's currently a poll. Go ahead and vote on whichever game you want. I've been told to ask you to vote for The Leprechauns by Nimrod Jankowski, because that's his team. But, yeah.
I mean, now especially, I'm not going to do it.
And we do have another question from the commissioner, asking if we foresee anyone who drops to the bottom half pool, so after you finish the preliminary round, being able to qualify for the cash bracket in their respective tiers. So effectively, not to say you nuke your first half of the season, but you end up doing poorly, and then you manage to kind of sweep the second half and get yourselves into an upper, I guess, a positive rating for the season.
Yeah, that's a week 3 topic.
See, Rob, this is why you're not in production.
Yeah. How about coming to a meeting, Rob? Jesus. Yeah, so that's not what we're going to talk about. But we'll get to that next week, honestly. So a little teaser for next week. We will talk about, because by that point, we're going to have some pretty interesting scenarios. I think a lot of teams will be 2-1. A lot of teams will be 1-2. We can theoretically.
You are going to be 0-3.
Yeah, it will be 0-3. God damn it. Losing in a fucking safety. Jesus. Sorry.
Self-imposed.
Yeah. That was fun. That was fun. What's a game that feels most like vomit? Yeah, when you lose on a safety on the third to last play of the game. That'll do it. I want to talk about the 2-0 and 0-2 teams. This is like a typical MoCon topic, but it allows us to look at a wide variety of teams. And I'm going to sort of give you the team, give you the breakdown of the roster, and then you tell me if you're surprised that they're 2-0 or 0-2. I see, for example, Ice Up. To me, Ice Up is sort of one of the top tier teams in the division. We have the guys like Max Mickey Marini, Jordan McInnes, Shaq Lattimore, and of course one of the Marini brothers throwing.
Shaq Lattimore's back in the league?
Shaq Lattimore is back in the league.
Did he get injured at one point?
I don't
or was
remember.
He just off last season. I don't remember hearing him.
I think he might have just taken a season off. So yeah, that team to me, I think there's no debate there. I think there's not even a topic for us there. We know they're better. We see Red Raiders, the return of Mike Roy, and this is a familiar group when you see Hinsley Adams, Dave Daou, Robert White coaching up the defense, Sean Haney on the team. They took on Dreambreakers and smoked them. They took on Centaurs. Centaurs are a tough, gritty team to beat, but they beat them by a point. So does the fact that they've had like decent competition surprise you that like Mike Roy is back? Well, he's been playing in co-ed, but does it surprise you now that he's back with a relatively new core? He's at 2-0, and he's facing decent competition.
Well, the storyline paints itself because Ice Up and Red Raiders are going to play next week.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the defining moment to see which of these teams is actually for real or not. As for Mike Roy himself, no, I'm not really surprised. I mean, even in the past when he's played
I believe he played MFL with a lot of the Red Raiders guys. I might be mistaken on that. So if the guys from that team, Rob White or anybody else wants to reach out, let me know. A lot of what we do, unfortunately, is speculative because we don't have the resources of ESPN. Because I'm in a studio by myself, that's how little resources we have these days.
But if you look at the roster for Red Raiders, I mean, Sean Haney, Rob White, I think we talked about this last week, Marvin Steinberg, Hinsley Adams, Dave Daou, amongst other names. This is a good roster, so don't look at this as, Mike Roy can call his plays, and if they run the routes properly, the chemistry is going to build itself over time. And if he's already knows a few of them from either the co-ed league or playing outdoors or any other leagues, I don't see why this team isn't going to do well.
Yeah. Team Ethnic has often had seasons where they're excellent or seasons where they're terrible. They beat Le Prince de Rive Sud, and they completely dismantled Dreambreakers. I guess Dreambreakers are just surprising me. I guess we're going to talk about them in a second, too, because they're one of the 0-2 teams. Team Ethnic, they are looking good. It seems to be one of those seasons where, they're sharp. Since Benoit Lawler's taken over, the offense has been absolutely out of this world. But the defense has been a concern.
Well, you say that even for Benoit Lawler. I mean, he has 13 touchdowns, which is awesome, but 4 interceptions in those 2 games. I mean, the touchdowns are great. Like, don't get me wrong. But those INTs...
But it doesn't matter when you're playing... Like, they're playing such a high variance game. They have so many possessions. They attack constantly. It's changing the math. It's why nobody cares Pat Mahomes had 12 interceptions last year.
Yeah.
Because he also threw 50 touchdowns. Because he threw for 4,000 yards. You know what I mean? Like, it changes the math on it. You can miss a bunch of shots, but if all the shots that are going in are 3-pointers, it matters less that you miss open 3-pointers than you miss open layups, right?
So next week they're going to play the Bruins, who lost 2 games now.
Yeah. We'll talk about the 2 Bruins in a second. Or do you want to do that too? You want to go? I guess you want to go Dakla Pool and then Clusters Pool.
Only because Team Ethnic and Bruins are playing next week. So
fair. That sets it up.
Segue.
Transition. Yeah. So. We saw Zach Swern return this week. I believe he seems to have a gameplay, but I didn't see him on the field week 1.
I believe he's DNP or injured or something.
Okay, but he did play this past week. He has a passing attack.
Yes, he does.
So, that said, with him back in the lineup, Gab Wise has been throwing 3 interceptions against Chocolate Thunder, and I know Chocolate Thunder are the same guys we're familiar, talking about. Joe Cano, Nicky Papich, Tim Horner. We saw them just win a championship. we look at Bruins now. Is Gab Wiseman somewhat out of his depth in tier 2?
I don't think so. And even, the core he has around him, Nelson Pereira, Ryan Aridi, Zach Zwern, Gabriel Poisson, these are all people who can make plays for him. So
that's the thing is, I don't think you can blame the roster.
I think he's trying to get too creative, though, because his style where, he sees a first read and then he doesn't like it and he tries to kind of bounce to the outside, cut back in, try and make a move on the rusher and basically make a big play. I just think he needs to trust his guys, instead of trying to hesitate and pull the ball down when you see a receiver or a DB trying to shoot one of his routes, just throw it. Just throw it. I think you're getting into more trouble trying to buy yourself time than you are just throwing the ball.
Yeah, like sometimes sort of living for another down might be a better opportunity than sort of running around. Like you said, like the players on the team, like you have, Ryan Reede is a skill player. You have guys like Gab Poisson, who again might not be familiar to tier 1 audiences watching, but dude's excellent. Dude's a very good player. You have guys like Zach Zwern, who has upper division experience. Up to, I think he was playing. Didn't he win a championship in tier 2 with STL? There you go. So I mean, there's just a lot of talent on this team. So it kind of, I find it concerning to a degree that Gab Wiseman has yet to find success with Bruins. Not yet, Eagle. We're gonna go through the teams.
Oh, okay.
They're 2-0 and 0-2. Unless you want to, do you really want me to call now?
No, because it's around time. That's all.
I know. Let's go another 5 or 6 minutes in the segment, and then we'll cut the
Sure.
Alex Holowach. Les Mythiques, I think, are in trouble. Did they want to register in tier 2, or that's where there was space?
I don't know, actually.
I also don't know. We should know. Anyone from Les Mythiques, if you're watching or will watch later, please reach out to us. Let us know. Les Mythiques are brand new players.
I think this is the team that registered late. Yeah,
they've scored 12 points. They're looking Miami Dolphin-like so far. Actually, they've scored more points through 2 games than the Miami Dolphins.
sad but true.
Yeah. It's an interesting situation to be in for them. I haven't had the opportunity to quite see them play yet. So I'm going to do some scouting to see what it is about them that's not quite working. Of course, if you need any help, feel free to reach out to me and Eagle, and we'd be glad to talk to you. That is the main reason that we built this topic in, is because for a new team that's struggling, if there's and this is, I believe, the only new team across the Fall Cup. That's this new.
That's brand new.
Yeah.
Yes, I think there are teams that have added multiple new players, but this is the one that's kind of as fresh as it gets.
That's fair. I mean, well, that's it. Like, there's not a single player on a team with FPF experience. From the picture, they appear to be athletic, so it's just a question of learning
And
the
happy.
game. Yeah, and happy
For now.
Yeah. Hopefully that keeps up. Now, this is the one that I don't get. Dream Breakers at 0-2.
Well, I mean, they also had some hard matchups, right? You had Red Raiders and Team Ethnic. You have Mangoose next week. You have
But it's okay, like-
the week after.
But they're also getting smoked.
Yeah.
Like, that's the part of this that I find hard to deal with. And, like we talked about, I mean, we've seen also the big story, I guess, here is Pierre-Alexandre Tachier has not played a single game. Right? Like, he's your best player. If he's not there, you're not going to win. Vincent Lagenière has played, but it's not a 1-2 punch anymore at this point. If you look at the team stats, François Dessereau looks like he's just catching a ton of checkdowns, and Vincent Lagenière is the only one doing some serious damage. Although Dessereau has been the red zone target for them, right? So he's been checkdowns in red zone. So, but other than that, the ball just doesn't seem to be moving, and
But
when you look at,
they're still putting up 20 points, 26 points. The problem is their defense. They've allowed 40 and 53 respectively over the last 2 games. Like, you're not going to forget how many points you're scoring. You're likely not going to win games if you're allowing people to score 6 or more touchdowns a game.
Yeah, I agree. And that was the Team Ethnic situation. That was the narrative in spring. Now it's Dream Breakers with that situation. To be honest, I thought they were a favorite in the tier to start with. Warriors have returned, and they returned in typical Warrior fashion. They're 2-0. they faced tents and hammocks and put up an impressive win against a team that doesn't get blown out very easily. And they squeaked by
Admittedly,
Mean
there were
Machine.
only 5 players.
Oh, that's true. That's the game they were the five players. Yeah, that's true. And then Mean Machine, they squeaked out a win. So is it, they won a tight matchup and then they beat a team that they otherwise would have lost to, or do you think this is sort of like legit?
Well, then again, Tents and Hammocks is going to survive primarily on how Aylward plays, and the brotherly connection, let's call it, or how much the rest of the receiving core is going to be needed. So Alex Joltapuff is going to carry them. But once you kind of figure that out, and I think the Warriors have played long enough to kind of understand that, or hopefully have tuned in, where we've kind of given all the cheat sheets on how to beat that system. If you have the athletes to do it, you can easily win that matchup. So maybe it wouldn't be as lopsided. Maybe Hammocks score 1 or 2 more. Maybe Warriors score 1 less, but they still end up winning or so.
That whole family of teams, guys, stop building rosters with 7 players. It's cheaper if you add an extra player, and you'll stop having games where you're missing guys. The thing is, though,
I think Warriors are going to go 3-0 because they got Supply and Command next week.
And we'll talk about Supply and Command in a second, I guess. But Michael Solomenes looks as good as he's always looked. I thought he stayed in lower divisions. It was nonsense that at one point he had 96 touchdowns in 2 seasons and was still in Division 6. And in the past, it was kind of a one-trick pony for a while with Stefano Solomene. But, Stefano Solomene famously was suspended from FPF. So seeing him back, maybe he's learned how to play without his brother. We see involvement by Jansen Voss, who's always part of the offense, but again, getting more and more involved. And Emil Scaff's not even a guy we've ever really heard of in FPF.
I think what I like here is that if you look at the receivers, first off, okay, so the man technically has the most receptions, but Stefanidis, I hope I pronounced that right, and Scaff both have 7 receptions. They both have almost 100 yards, which is equal to Solomene. Sure, he has the red zone targets, but, the rest of the team is contributing here. So it's no longer the Solomene show. There is a supporting cast that's going to help him out. And I think when you're going to try and game plan against Warriors, the strategy is going to be much more tricky because you can't just put your best guy on Solomene and say, okay, we're done. Which in the past, that's effectively what used to happen, right? Yeah. You shut down Solomene, you win the game. Now it's going to be a very different way of trying to, maybe high-low him, but have some other coverage across the board. I haven't seen them play yet, but I'm sure they have some updates in their playbook, or at least Michael's looking at other guys and it's going to be much harder to figure out what they're doing.
They're playing at the same time as me yesterday, so I didn't see much of the game, but it did appear Michael Solomene was more religiously going through his reads than just chucking the ball up. Let's get to Alex Holowach in a second, but until he joins us, I just want to say it's been impressive. EZW is a team we'll touch on in a second. We'll ask Alex Holowach if he's seen him. Alex joins us now on Calling the Audible. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, my man. How's it going?
Wonderful, wonderful. I like this new trend, Eagle, where you have the most ridiculous picture you find of each member and use that as the profile picture while we have them on call.
I'm happy with this.
We have a picture with a dog exploding out of your chest, Hollow.
Oh, I love that photo. That's in my top 5, absolutely, of all time. So, touche to you, Eagle at Master Control. And I didn't say hi to you either. So,
hello.
How's it going, Eagle?
I'm doing good. We miss you, man.
We do. FPF's not the same without Alex Holowach.
I appreciate that. You and I were chatting about your first article, and I was giving you praise over how much I enjoyed it, especially the new theme-driven aspect to it. I thought it was super refreshing. Article writing was always on point, as always, but we're discussing it recently, and to be honest, I always will miss FPF when I'm not part of it. But at the same time, I am enjoying my season off, taking a little bit of space to kind of rest and recuperate and all that good stuff, and just enjoying the late summer into early autumn transition right now. So as much as I miss the game, at the same time, it's always good to find some perspective and take a little distance as well.
You've transitioned into the Kirkland League, which we'll talk about it in a second. But for now, we're talking about a 2-0 team that I think you may have some familiarity with, although they are, a Tier 2 team. Jeremy White is a leader of EZW. Jeremy White, of course, being an employee of FPF, and also his style is pretty unique. Have you had a chance to ever see him play quarterback?
I have on several occasions actually. That's kudos to my time at as a scorekeeper for FPF. I've seen some quite a range of FPF action, and I've had the opportunity to catch Jeremy play on a few instances. Was always impressed by him. Every time I saw him play, he did very well. Has great rapport with his receiving cast. I think they probably have a few years together. By the way, it seems how they play. Jeremy is super poised, especially given his his age overall and his experience in the league, which is deceivingly more than it comes off as. But at the same time, you'd expect him to be a little more raw, and he's just a very polished quarterback. Plays very smart. Takes a lot of the short stuff, which QBs in the lower divisions always have trouble with. They always get itchy trigger finger and try to pop the deep balls and maybe throw into coverage. Jeremy is super disciplined, and I think those are all trademarks of really intelligent and QBs who are going to prosper in the future.
He's going to have to teach something to Charles-Olivier Lavigne, because he's also with them on all hooks, and they're 0-2 in Tier 1. So,
but that's a big jump for C. Levine and co.
Oh, yeah. And that being said, they only lost to STL 40-39 this week, and last week they lost 34-33 to Junkyard Dogs. So they're in those games. It's just bad luck.
And Junkyard Dogs, guys, first off, yeah, you're absolutely right. All hooks, impressive what they've done so far, showing the spirit of the Fall Cup, really, which is lower teams moving up to higher levels and competing with teams that they otherwise wouldn't have thought they would share the field with normally. So just to prove that the perceived disparity in talent is much narrower in reality than it is that we make it up to seem in our own minds. But guys, Junkyard Dogs 2-0. Who would have thought after 2 weeks? Jason Rossi, I wanted to make sure I got that right. Jason Rossi, 10 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. Very polished football quarterbacking right now, and they're impressive. They definitely impressed me the most after 2 weeks.
Well, there's a couple of things here. One is I remember Jason Rossi in his first ever FPF game. They were, like most teams when they start in FPF, god-awful. So it's impressive to see them doing well in Tier 1. And I don't know if you saw my script or not, but literally the next question I had for you was the more surprising start, Junkyard Dogs 2-0 or Rockets with Rob Mashtub at 0-2.
Now, I was looking over the Rockets, and yes, it is. You see, Rob Mashtub, one of the premier top 5 quarterbacks in the league overall, is 0-2 in Fall Cup Tier 1, which is, I don't know, it's kind of a weird way to equate that to either Division 1 or Division A in the summer or winter.
It's like a weird combination of Division 1 to 3.
Yeah,
it's not balanced at all.
Yeah, it's definitely a home brew with lots of different mixes going on. But if you take a closer look at that lineup, it starts to be a little bit more reasonable to see them having lost the first 2 games, especially when you consider that they lost the first game versus BYOB with Matt Renee and his semi-normal crew, a very kind of experienced quarterback in FPF, and they got
that finally fits his skill set more than he's had in the past.
That's correct. I think they have. It looks like the players they have a very kind of. They finally maybe found a more even keel balance to the game emotionally. They've always had a hot-headed type of roster, and as soon as things have started to go wrong, you can tell they were visibly shook in the past, and that kind of derailed their game plan at times. But I think now they have. Maybe they finally found that a little bit more zen, and that might pay off for them throughout the course of the first 4 games at least. But back to the Rockets, I think you can see there's a little bit of the roster's a little bit light. It's featuring obviously the Reedy brothers. Ryan's on that team, right?
No, just Jad.
Oh, just Jad. It's featuring Jad and the Bacalus brothers, especially Theo Bacalus being the highlight on that roster. But after that, you're lacking kind of that top edge receiver, which they're known to have. Usually they have 1 or 2 pieces at wideout who can really open up the field. So this is really more of a makeshift roster in my mind. So it starts to be a little bit more reasonable that they struggle a little bit out of the gate. Rob's not polished yet. He did not play in the spring. It's taken them a few weeks to get going, but I think this is probably one of those teams you're not gonna want to face in the second round, especially if they drop to the lower tier.
Also, I mean, if you look at the games played, there's 13 total games or total games played for the roster over 2 weeks, which means one game was 7 players, one game was 6. So you have no subs or one sub, and exactly what you said, right? There's no other than Theo Bakelis, who only played one game so far. That's tough to go out on the field in Tier 1 and compete.
Well, and like there's a couple of guys on the team, like we talked about Gab Poisson. Raoul Baroudi is another guy.
Boris Balur is up and coming.
But they're all guys who also haven't played high division FPF, and so you look at them and they take on BYOB. BYOB is ostensibly a Division 2 team, and Junkyard Dogs are a very good Division 3 team. So while Rod Mashtub's level is so much higher, let's say, than a lot of other guys, the rest of the team seems to be on par with the division, if not lower.
And next week isn't much easier with Vinny's Huffman. And then lastly, all hooks to close out the preliminary round, which is probably the fairest game.
They might go 1-4.
Yeah.
And you're taking guys who are predominantly found success in a kind of support role in the past, and now you're thrusting them into the premier role on this team. And obviously, it's going to take some transition. Will it ever click? Who knows? There might be one of those experiments that just never finds the right side of the day. But give them a little bit of time, let them stretch their legs a bit, see if they can get it together. But definitely a little bit surprising 0-2.
And if there's a year to try and do it, well, this is a season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of parity in Division 1.
So we've talked about it a little bit, but as a Division 1 player, Hollow, what do you think about the hard cap in the highest levels of FPF?
Well, I appreciate the love as always, my man. But I've never played Division 1 before,
sorry, my mistake.
I've yet to test myself in
right?
level. But what I think. So what do we get back to? What I think of the hard cap in Division and Tier 1. I was like a strong proponent for this in the spring, and I will remain a strong proponent for it because I believe that just as is the kind of statement now that's just commonly heard from FPF support staff, that we need to definitely encourage teams to test their boundaries and move up and compete against the upper echelon in quotes, and kind of realize for themselves that they can stand their ground against these teams, and they can play them tough, and they can even win sometimes. So I think once we get that kind of sense of confidence spread out further across the divisions, it's finally that's the only way we're going to be able to salvage our higher divisions, because we have a problem. And when you're looking at the spring and there's only 4 teams, and in the winter you're hoping for 8 teams, I mean, this has been something that we've been working on now for a few years, and I think the situation is getting a little bit critical. So it's time to.
Hello?
We may have lost Alex. Hello?
Hello?
Hey, there you are.
Hello?
I don't know.
Hello?
Hey, we lost you for a second.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, I lost you there. My Bluetooth battery died, so I'm back on.
I see. But yeah, no, I think it's very important. I think that's the only way we're going to see more teams in division, and that's ultimately what everyone wants. I remember when I first started working for the media, Marco Masiotra told me, "Hey, try and like push teams to move up, because like I'm tired of facing the same guys every week." You know what I mean? So I think this is an unorthodox way to get people up there, but I feel it's the only way guys will feel confident enough with their team, and on top of that, it's the only thing that'll push established FPF veterans to go down and look for talent in the lower divisions.
That's also fundamental, and because we have a dearth of established Division 1 players, and everybody wants to draw from that same pool constantly. But the thing is, like, how many teams are gonna get Justin McLean, and like how many teams are gonna get George Gariep? Like, he can only play on one team in Division 1 and one team in Division 2. So we have to start looking outside of those regular household names in order to build these rosters. And you see smart teams are doing that. They're implementing these younger guys, but it's not being done nowhere near enough, to really start this revolution. So
I agree.
We always agree. Let's disagree about something.
I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I remember I felt the worst ever pairing on the podcast was one season was me and you, Hollow. I don't know if it's for a whole season or not, but I remember saying like, I feel like we're just always saying the same thing. And it was just an awkward season of the podcast. And
it was. Yeah, I think it was one episode, but thankfully for the viewers, it was only one episode.
Oh, then that's why I paired myself later on with the far less intelligent Simon Dagenet.
Oh, far less intelligent Simon Dagenet, huh?
The far less
I thought you were going to
2-0 Simon Dagenet.
Well, so
that's right.
And I have a question. So you mentioned my article. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, of course, it's on flyplusfootball.com. It's one of those pieces that's not temporal. It's related to sort of the season in general. While it does reference week one, it's something that I believe to be true for sort of season-long information. So I was curious what you thought of sort of my list of guys that now that they're here, guys we can pay attention to in a season where we don't have Alex Holowach, Dan Lazara, Kevin Wyeth, Marco Masiotra, and so on.
I love that you asked me that because going over the list, some guys that I agree with you with. Obviously, Maher is the top pivot in this category.
I don't want to include Maher because we already know, right? Like that's
we know.
The guy
he gets rid of the ball in under 2 seconds every single time. I mean, he's a machine. But if we're looking outside of that, I do agree that Joey is well positioned to be very successful this season. He has a strong team in 2.5 Dance, practically the same team that he went to the finals with in Division B, if not even better in some sense. And then I'm looking at, but one thing I vehemently disagree with is your assessment with Dylan Taylor, especially challenging him as being worthy of being in the top category, let's say, of the top tier of pivots in this division. I think that when you're after Maher, I think Dylan is obviously the next guy in this division, and I think with the way that STL's roster is built, I think he is the hands-on favorite to be the top pivot at the end of the season, whatever that means for fall. But I think he's going to cruise through the competition, and he's extremely talented. I think he doesn't get enough credit because we remember the losses, right? That's human nature. We always remember the blow-ups, but we tend to forget that he's put up big numbers, right? And
he's a championship quarterback. Like he's won a championship. Though what I meant is, it's just I felt as though even as I wrote it, I felt like my point is not particularly going to come across. I think he's exceptionally talented. You're right. After Joe Maheu, in terms of just raw talent, the next best guy out there is Dylan Taylor. There are times where we've seen more of sort of the fair weather Dylan Taylor, that when things are going well, it's awesome. We've also seen games where it completely falls apart. And I guess that's true of everyone on the list, but for some reason, it does always stick more to Dylan Taylor. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's just look, I'm going to be critical, but at the same time, I'm going to include myself in this. There's just some guys who develop a reputation of losing in the ultimate game, right? And there's some guys who are just perennial champions in the ultimate game. You're looking at winners. You're looking at Maher. You're looking at Kevin Wyeth. You're looking at probably ANP. After if Flagmossack can repeat this year, I think he's broken that threshold. Looking at guys like Dylan and myself included, and even throw Dan Lazara in there, and maybe even Marco at times, Masiocha, guys who have incredible seasons and somehow just collapse in the finals, or have an off game in the finals, if not a total collapse. Just enough to not have their best stuff at the time when it matters most. So there's a lot of pressure in FPF's higher divisions. It's no joke, as recreational and as fun as it is to play, especially in the lower divisions. When you get to the upper divisions, you have guys who want to compete and you want to win. And no matter what anybody says, you're always going to feel that pressure. So I think there's some guys who can kind of weather that extremely well, and those are the champions, right? Those are guys, even if you look at a guy like Maher, who doesn't take quarterback of the year awards, he's always in the finals, and he's always winning the big game, and he's always having his best moment in that game, Mm-hmm. So that's ultimately what you want to be, but not everyone has that constitution. Not everyone's built that way. Some guys struggle with it a little bit. Some guys takes them a little bit longer to figure out how to be confident in that environment. And I think that, probably Dylan is in that. I think he's finding his way. Every year we see him get more and more comfortable in these big games, less and less emotional. You can never deny the raw talent that this man has. I mean, he's a gunslinger through and through. So
I enjoy watching him play. I've often told you that you're my favorite quarterback to watch play in FPF, just because I love the style that you have. That you're always have your foot on the gas pedal. Watching you is like watching a Fast and Furious movie, which, coming from me, is a compliment. It might not be a compliment from everyone, but from me, that's a compliment. And Dylan Taylor reminds me of that to a degree as well. And like I said, I mean, it's not the talent that I question, and it's not the competitiveness at all. It just, like I said, at times it has gotten the better of him. But you know what? Hey, it led to a disagreement between Hollow and I. So there we go.
Can you give me a quick your power rankings? Let's say top 3 teams. I know, but I just want to hear your perspective. After 2 weeks, who is the top 3 teams in the division? You can just list it off.
First thing that comes. So tier 1, top 3, tier 2, top 3, just tier 1?
Just tier 1, yeah.
Just tier 1? Okay, let's take a look.
If it helps you, I'll start with mine, just at a glance.
No,
so after
copy you.
I won't.
No,
Peeze will never copy on purpose.
Peeze is a man of integrity. He always has been. So he's definitely going to. So I have at the top, I'm going to put STL after 2 weeks. I think this is a complete team and led by a great quarterback, and they have some top tier talent. Second, I'm gonna put 2.5 Dans. I think that what they showed this week against Urgence was just a complete utter destruction. Just came out and just picked them apart methodically. And then for the third team, I'm gonna be a little bit biased. I'm gonna throw in my boys Vinny's Huffman into that spot because I think I like Vinny at quarterback. I thought that we were going to have him play for us last fall, and then at the end we had a switch just because I want to see Vinny's redemption story in FPF, and I think this is his moment now, and he's gonna find his groove. So I'll put Vinny Huffman up there at number 3.
So what's annoying is essentially, as I started looking it up while talking to you, that's pretty much the 3 I got. Honestly, I like Vinny Galano a lot.
Called it.
But no, I'm gonna throw in another team just to disagree. But my criticisms again, it's not even criticism. My comments regarding Dylan's past history in FPF does not have anything to do with his future performance. In FPF, more than any other league, past history is not a predictor of future performance because guys get older, guys get more experience, guys get more talent around them. It's a very dynamic league in that way. So I think this may be the season for him because also the roster is absolutely stacked. I think Vinny's Huffman with Vinny Galano, I don't think it's a huge drop off from you in a sense, Hollow. Like while I think you're absolutely like a stud QB, like Vinny is nothing to scoff at. We just sort of forgot how good Vinny was, I think, which is something I alluded to in the article. And, when you look at 2.5 Dans, I do think this is the best, if not, second or either the best or tied with the best roster that, Joey Taylor's ever had. I understand that for part of the game, Urgence were only 5, but even when they were 6, they looked better with Joey Taylor than with Dan Lazara. Before I get an angry text from Dan Lazara at 3 a.m, I'm not saying Joey Taylor's more talented than Dan Lazara. I'm saying this team is perfectly built for Joey Taylor. But man, it's just so hard to discount Braves U. So I don't know how I ranked them 1, 2, 3, 3A or 1, 2, 3, 4. I told you I suck at doing top whatever lists. But man, the top end talent of Georges Garipi, JD Chevalier, John Maheu, Mike Piercin is nonsense. Tamville, that's there. And people are like, oh, but they got a couple of girls on the team. Those girls are insane. They're incredibly competitive. They're incredibly quick. They're valuable contributors on the team in Constance Miller and Lauriane Beauchamp. These are they're women with FPF championship pedigree in the co-ed division as well.
I love what they did, of course, too. I think the girls in FPF, or the women in FPF, have been the most impressive. Besides, well, along with the juniors, the last few years. I think if you take a look across the divisions, the two categories that have shown like just mind-blowing amounts of talent have been the juniors and the in the co-ed division. And in the co-ed division, as well as everyone does, that all that matters is how good your girls are in co-ed. Like, you can have the top guys in FPF, but the team that's going to win is going to be the team with the best girls, or the best women. I'm just super impressed with the caliber of the females in our league. I like this Braves youth team for sure. I mean, the top. What can you say? Just champions through and through. I do want to see what they have in store for the next two games on their roster, because this week they beat the team whose name I have the hardest time liking, Dead Prez.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of respect for Jeff Rosenblatt. He looks like a groovy dude, but you pick, like, I don't know. I'm just assuming it was him who chose the name. It's like the choice for somebody who's like 21 years old and just started getting into hip hop beyond Eminem or Drake or something. Like that's what Dead Prez represents to me. So yeah, I don't want to read too much into this victory from this past week, because I don't think Dead Prez is there yet as one
agree.
of the.
I do
Yeah.
agree.
Hollow, before we let you go, I have a question for you. I think October 16th is the date. We're going to be going through our rules committee. And so for the purposes of this exercise, I am giving you carte blanche. You can change anything you want in FPF. What would you do if you were commissioner for a day?
Oh my gosh, this is gonna get me in trouble.
I mean, the easy thing is just borrow what you like from KTFL, right?
You know what? This is gonna get me in trouble, because I have a lot of respect for the officiating crew in FPF. I think they do a wonderful.
Got it.
I just think that come playoffs, particularly finals, that they just ref entirely different than they do the rest of the year. It's like, put away the whistles, and we're just gonna turn a blind eye to all kind of physical contact in the finals. From my experience the last few years, so I would, if there's one thing, I know it's kind of nuanced, but I would reinforce the issue that this is a non-contact league, and that not only in the finals but all throughout the season, that we really step up penalties on anybody who tries to initiate contact, either on purpose or even by accident. I think we just have to kind of take that element out of the game, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to go into work and on Monday and go back to their home, go home to their families that evening, and not have to go to a hospital room. So we want to compete, we want to play hard, but at the same time, we want to play safe, and we want to leave in one piece. So I would address that issue. I think if there's one grand thing that I could do.
I mean, I think it's fair. I don't think any of especially like the longtime refs of FPF, I don't think any of them would disagree. In the end, I've been on rules committee, and I could say that the priority is always the safety of players. And I will say, as a guy who's calmed down through the years, because I used to be known to be a little bit louder in people's faces, the one thing that still gets me angry is when I get hit. I can't stand it. We all work on Monday. Guys who specifically try to hurt other people in a recreational league are the lowest level of douchebag in the world. So there couldn't be harsh enough penalties for them. And to a degree, I can't speak to the fact of it being called differently. I don't have data to support or deny whether or not they coach differently in the playoffs. Although I do think you may be right about that. I will say that it's definitely contact is something we're always aware of, and it's definitely something we have to look at. Although I do feel the league's gotten less reckless, and there's been more calls on sort of reckless and unsafe contact, which I'm happy with. But we'll definitely take a look at that and see, because there's a referees committee, and there's also sort of the applications committee. So they're two different things.
Wait! I got another thing for Eagle. I sorry to cut you off. I know you guys are working on the time of games, so you brought it down from 11 till 10:30. But the earlier games are always more appreciated from the players. Like, nobody wants to finish at midnight and drive home and get in bed by 1:32 in the morning with the adrenaline pumping after a game. So less night games and more.
Unfortunately, that's more what availabilities we can get at the fields. But As FPF grows, of course, we have more and more pull because we are a bigger and bigger league each year. One thing I want to see gone is this bullshit rule from KTFL where the ball can't be advanced after a tip. That one, I can assure you, I can almost guarantee you will be changed based on the two voters in this room that are going to vote against it. So I hate that
I
rule.
play defense and I hate it. Just imagine.
That one's got to go, right? They put the two rules in place at the same time. That was one of them. The other one being that if you punt from inside your 10, you go back to your 1. I think that one has proven to be pretty successful so far. Well, just my opinion. But,
I think that if you punt from inside your own 10 and it goes to half field, doesn't help eliminate collisions from lower divisions, because what happens is it doesn't give an incentive for teams to punt, and there are more teams in the lower divisions, and that's where we're more likely to see sort of reckless collisions. So that's the part of that rule that bothers me. There's never a reason to punt in FPF anymore. I also think we're at a point where if we're going to do that, then let's just remove punting.
4th and 20 from your 2-yard
line. But what do you gain on the field?
Well, now you don't gain anything.
That's what I'm saying. You don't gain a single thing to punt. So there's no incentive to punt the ball ever. There's no longer a circumstance where it makes sense to punt in FPF.
That's right, and maybe that was the goal. I don't know, to get maybe lower division teams closer to the end zone, giving them a greater chance to score and develop that way. There's different ways to look into it, but
we're gonna have to do some.
I generally,
I think this is all it's done is lead to more blowouts, in my opinion, because the stronger teams will just further dominate a game with less field to cover. Holo, thank you for joining us. We're going to close out the show on the other side of this, and hopefully we'll have you on more this season.
Anytime, guys. It's always fun. Have a good evening, and thanks for having me, and keep it up, guys. Keep up the good work.
We'll have you in studio soon, and we'll get into some whiskey.
Ooh, can't wait for that. I'm waiting for the invite. All right, guys.
Bye. That's Alex Holowach joining us. I want to touch on something really quick, and then we're going to go to Games of the Week.
Yep.
And then we'll call it a show.
Yep.
One quick thing I want to talk about a new team. As I mentioned, there was one brand new team in Tier 2. There's a new team in Tier 3 called the Untouchables.
Mm-hmm.
I got a chance to play against them this week. Overall, nice dudes. They have Olivier Delaris, who's on the team, so he's sort of like the one familiar face. As soon as I saw him, I was like, guys, we all need to pay attention to that dude, And so they won a game after giving up the lead. They won a game by acquiring a safety on the last play of the game. But what was most interesting about that is their team, that they do a lot of things that a lot of new teams in FPF do. They run plays with a halfback. They take too many deep shots. But I do like their athleticism. There's they all got pretty good hands. They all got a lot of speed. I'm looking forward to seeing how they develop. For the meantime, I do think as well, if you guys they also don't send a rusher sometimes in the red zone.
Oh,
like
God.
on converts.
That's a
Do
not never rush.
The only reason 1 and 9ers were in that game was because on converts they didn't rush, and that was the difference until we got a safety in the last play of the game that cost us the game. So that said, if you want help, if you want to learn a little bit about FPF, similar to the offer we made to the other new team, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. But definitely, if you guys are around and you see a team wearing polos on the field, that's the Untouchables. It looks weird, but man, they're a fun watch for a new team. They're a fun watch. It's pretty interesting. Eagle, what time is it?
It's time for Games of the Week.
Thanks, Eagle.
Because you're not doing predictions in your article anymore, are you?
I'm not, because our articles are no longer divisional. They are thematic.
Do you want to do, let's say, like 2 games from each tier here?
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about the Junkyard Dogs STL game.
That's a great game. I think STL just to everything we've said, STL just has a better team. I don't think Junkyard Dogs has the dogs to run with STL in this game.
And let's talk.
I think on the surface it's a good game. It's a good storyline. I'd be surprised if Rossi can keep it within 2 scores.
Braves U, Urgence Medic,
bunch
of friends.
What's your pick? I'm alone. You got to make a pick.
Oh my God, I gotta make a pick. I'm going with STL.
Okay.
Brave View, Urgence Medic.
So Braves U lost their first game to Simon, which is the second most embarrassing experience in FPF. The most embarrassing experience is, of course, losing to Peeze. But they then take on Urgence, who aren't playing well so far. I just think that unless Urgence can sort out the roster issue and unless they get everyone there, I don't think they can compete with Braves U. But it'll still be a close score because Urgence does not get blown out. Except for last week, because 5 guys.
Does Lightweight go 3-0 against 2HD? I'm going no. Also, I'm taking Braves U.
I want to say that the record against 2.5 Dans is awful. So I'm going to say it, even though it may or may not be true, because I knew you were going to ask me this, and I forgot to research it. So 2.5 Dans, because history, even though I said in the last segment, history is not a good predictor of the future in FPF. So, inconsistency and hypocrisy. 2.5 Dans.
Tier 2, Outlaws versus EZW.
This is actually a legit good game. This will be fun. This is a team that goes full speed all the time against, would it be fair to say Outlaws play offense the way your grandmother would drive?
Yes. That's so true.
Is your grandmother living?
No.
So maybe slightly faster.
Yeah.
Next. Oh, wait, what's your pick?
I'm going to take EZW.
I also haven't made a pick in this game. I actually think that the slow pace of Outlaws will annoy the hell out of Jeremy White, and it's going to get in his head. He's going to make mistakes. Outlaws will win.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, but let's actually make a pick. Red Raiders, Ice Up.
Ice Up's too good, man. Red Raiders are a good team. What they're doing is impressive. Ice Up, you can make an argument Ice Up doesn't belong in this tier.
I'm actually going to go Red Raiders. I trust Mike Roy. I think by this week, he's going to really understand his team, and I think they're going to take this one. And then last game, Diablos, Mean Machine.
I am never going to pick François Martin, but I have to because they're a much better team. God damn it. Adding Matt Lepage makes them absolutely formidable, and it allows the room for error that François Martin will inevitably make.
I'm going to agree with you. And let's go tier 3.
We will go through tier 3.
What's a good one here? Leprechaun's Threat Level Midnight. That might actually be game of the week, depending on how people vote.
I had a chance to watch Leprechauns. I was kind of impressed, actually. I was kind of impressed with what I saw. They're in for a challenge with the methodical offense of Joel Lemieux, but I didn't think Threat Level Midnight was going to be undefeated by this point in the season, so give me Leprechauns to... Can we say upset or just beat them?
Beat. Yeah.
Beat.
I'm going to go Threat Level Midnight, though. I think Joel Lemieux and Simon Richard are going to carry this game.
Okay.
We're going to take Replacements versus Lionhearts. Teams that are near and dear to our hearts.
Mm-hmm. I like the athletes added by Lionhearts. I got a chance to watch Replacements last night. The offense, it's different. The problems are different than they were in the past. In the past, there's a completely remedial offense that couldn't move the ball. Yesterday, I saw Frank Tioli, Colatrolo just taking too many chances, just airing out too many balls to receivers. Guys are open, and he's just always looking for the big play. I mean, I'm if anything, I'm a guy who can absolutely sympathize with that. But let me be the proof that that's not a successful way to play in FPF.
I'm going to go Lionhearts. I think Replacements make too many mistakes, and I think Lionhearts can actually capitalize on it.
And Lionhearts have added a lot of athletes, so
Yep.
it's going to be a challenging game for Replacements, I think.
And last game, Chocolate Barracudas, who are 2-0, who have beaten both Lionhearts and Replacements in the first 2 weeks, versus Los Banditos, struggling. What do you think for this is going to happen in this game?
I have to think at some point the best quarterback will win, and no offense to Sonny Elias. I always say that before I say something offensive. Fine, offense to Sonny Elias. Francis De Roche is a better quarterback. At some point, cream rises to the top. Give me Los Banditos for the win.
I think it's going to depend on what the roster looks like for Los Banditos. I think we know what to expect from the Barracudas, but this season, like we talked about earlier, Banditos, it really depends on who shows up. I'm going to go Chocolate Barracudas hesitantly here because I think if, like we mentioned, Vincent Benjamin isn't there, if Holowach isn't there, I think their defense is very different too. So I can see Barracudas squeezing this one out.
Great. Thank you, Eagle, for all the work you've done today. Thanks to, was it Nim who wrote to us? Who asked the question about tangerines and clementines? That was
Who
my
do you
brother.
think wrote
That
a
was my
question
brother.
about tangerine?
Thanks, Duke. That was a good question. It really made me think. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to my chauffeur for actually arriving on time. And thank you all for letting me be myself.
There's a story you're going to like.
No,
Or not
I won't
like.
like it. I promise you I won't like it. I think I'm sleeping here.